Hey everybody, welcome to the Blue Chip Podcast by fans for fans. This is your host Cody Potter. How y'all doing today? So the draft is officially over. For me, this is I'm tired. I'm just going to keep it 1,000 with you, man. I'm very very tired. Um, we're going to get right into this, man. I'm very very excited with where this team is going to be going forward. Let's start with Joshua Josephs. Yeah, man. So one thing I want to kind of show you, just kind of over here before I even go back to this, man. This is a game log, man. This is very much a game log of how I scout over the course of the years. I go back and forth between game logs, then I document it into binders of complete game logs, complete notes on these players, man. It's a ton of work. So one thing that then I go into my notes and stuff on my phone, things like that. I post a lot on forums and things like that. So when I go to my notes for players, Joshua Josephs, man, this is a guy that you'd see him heating up. You'd see him heating up in third down situations and pass rush, and Tennessee's defense might struggle to get back on the field as far as in favorable third down passing situations and things like that. You'd see him, like I said, you'd see him heating up, and then you'd see a fall off on the Tennessee defense as far as early first and second downs. This is a guy that plays the run a little bit better than what you would expect, especially for the amount of situational pass rushing, plays that he would get on the field. A guy that had, I think, 9 career sacks. And I think 4 of those sacks were strip sacks. That's a guy that's playing with length. That's a guy that's getting to the quarterback, knocking the ball out, things like that. A better player than what I think you were going to expect to get in the 5th round. There's a thing about sacks, man. I talk about sacks and interceptions very, very similarly. The splash plays, if you're searching for a guy with a high number of interceptions, if you're searching for a guy with a high number of sacks, a lot of times what I notice with these players is they are giving up a lot more in the run department than the actual splash get-home totals that they're giving up. This is a guy with truly elite length. I mean, we're talking 34-inch arms, 6'4", 250 pounds, give or take, whether it's 240, 250 pounds. Elite level get off. A guy that I think he has the skill set to translate. I thought this was a guy that was going to be probably going round 3, round 4. But you're getting him. Like I said, plays the run a little bit better. It's a guy that you can have on this roster long term. You're going to have this guy under contract for the next 4 years. So him and Odafe Owe are the only long term pieces that we have remaining on this defensive edge position. Whether it's Dorrance Armstrong, 1 year left, Kayvon Chaisson, 1 year contract. A guy that I would expect, if he continues his disruption and continues the presence that we've seen from Kayvon Chaisson the last year and a half, 2 years. What he gave you from the Patriots, what he gave you, his last year with his other team, that's a guy that I would expect. It's a 1 year, $12 million contract that we're talking about. A guy who can probably be north of 20, $25 million a season if he continues his trajectory that we've seen. This was a guy coming out in the first round, all the physical power, all the impact that you wanted to see. This Josephs is a guy that I think can very, very much be a rotational piece with absolute disruption on this team. Doesn't necessarily get swallowed up in the run game and can set an edge in the run. But as we've seen, man, this is a situational pass rusher that realistically day one can come in on third downs and give you reps. We know the depth was tested last year once Dorrance Armstrong, once Dedrick Wise went out. Dedrick Wise is returning. Dorrance Armstrong is returning. So that was your best pass rusher. That was supposed to be your best run-stopping edge on the early downs. Again, we're probably going to see more 3-4 this year. This is a guy that, is honestly probably the perfect height and build for a 3-4, outside linebacker, which is your rush defensive end, whether it would be the 4-3 in that type of situation, the 5-2-5. He's going to be an edge player. So again, man, I like the pick. I like the developmental traits. We very much see traits are king when it comes to this team and the way that they're stylistically trying to build their pass rushing. Power matters, length matters. Adafe Owe, is the one outlier on this team as far as 6'6" and the arm length and things like that. Then you're looking at K'Lavon Chaisson, the 6'3", 6'4". Dorrance Armstrong, 6'3", 6'4", longer length, than Joshua Josephs. You're adding that very similar skill set, very similar build, very similar skill set. The get off is very, very similar. So again, you're starting to look at the favorability of this team, man. Like, one thing I've liked about Adam Peters and the things that he has done. No, we did not go out into this draft and pick up a corner. I would have probably favored Chandler Rivers in that spot, but we saw the first 2 years under AP, he very, very much focused on corners and defensive backs. Year 2, you saw corner, offensive line with Laramie Tunsil and Josh Connerly Jr. He's addressing the positions and adding depth to these rooms. He's getting his top tier players and adding depth into the room. And a lot of times what he started doing was he started adding depth to the room, and then he gets his premier players. So, going into next year, we can talk about the names, man. We don't know where we're going to be picking this year. We obviously did not pick in the range that we thought we were going to be picking. So, again, there's a lot that goes into this. But as I said, I started around February looking forward to next year. So, we could be talking about Colin Simmons, the Texas edge, who will be coming out next year, Dylan Stewart. Let's go more into my notes. We could be talking about Lightfoot. I've talked about Lightfoot. This is a guy that's been a rotational piece in Miami. He's going to get his time. Amon Moten Sr., Amon Moten Sr., the defensive interior pressure guy from Miami. Moten Sr. playing next to Lightfoot, I think that's going to be a dynamic, piece. Mateo Ukulele, the defensive end from Oregon. We know his brother, the quarterback. There's some guys coming off the edge in this next year's class. They're going to be very, 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 very talented players. Whether it's the interior defensive line, whether it's the exterior defensive line. We can talk about LSU, whether it be Jordan Ross, an inside out kind of guy. Let's see. Ibragodbada from Texas Tech, another guy transferring over, to the Texas Tech. Texas Tech is putting a ton of money into the transfer portal. They're getting guys. They're retooling this team year over year. Eccles, the interior offensive lineman from Texas A&M. This is a guy that I really, really like. Justin Scott, Miami. Then we're talking about wide receivers next year, whether it be Charlie Becker or Marsh, the transfer over from Michigan State. Bryant Wesco Jr. is a guy that struggled, due to quarterback play with Kate Klubnik, at Clemson. Can we see this guy take the next step? Then you have Texas, Ryan Wingo and Cam Coleman. Can the offensive line, protect Arch Manning and give him the time now that he has two dynamic weapons outside? We already know what Jeremiah Smith is. We know that Chris Henry, the true freshman, Chris Henry Jr., we know about his dad and his story and things like that. There's going to be some really, 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 really top-end play. The quarterbacks, Damon Williams, whether it be Sam Levitt transferring over to LSU from Arizona State. Can it finally click for this guy at a premier program, with all the weapons that, LSU constantly turns out from the wide receiver position. Notre Dame with Carr. We're going to see Indiana turn over a lot of teams. Like I said, I've already kind of mentioned their wide receivers and things like that. So looking at next year, there's going to be premier level edge players. This year I had a ton of edges, throughout the draft. None of the necessarily premier blue chips. David Bailey was my one blue. We all know that I love Ruben Bain Jr. We're going to see some really, really, really premier players. And like I said, and it starts up top. It starts with Dylan Stewart for me, and then Colin Simmons would actually be my number 2 going into this season. I know that Dylan Stewart needs to show a little bit more than what he did this past year, but South Carolina kind of, didn't, meet up to what I expected from that roster. If Lenore Sellers clicks, if Dylan Stewart clicks, they play to the level of talent that they have, the level that they showed coming out of high school. Dylan Stewart's a local boy from around here, and I very much expect that boy to have, it's going to click. Dylan Stewart's a guy that could be going in the top 10, could overall be number 2 or 3 in the next year's class. Same thing with Colin Simmons and things like that from Texas. So again, man, there's going to be a ton of players coming out next year. Leonard Moore, the cornerback from Notre Dame, the safety from Notre Dame. There's a lot of really, really bright players coming out in this next year's class. And like I said, that's what I've been doing for the last couple months, is really, really just finalizing my grades going into the season, watching spring games and things like that. This will kind of lead me to our 6th round pick, the running back out of Penn State, another guy that I really, really, really liked going into last year. It's a guy that I think is going to be very, very impactful for this team, lining up, in the backfield with Bill Jacory-Krosky-Merritt. This guy does offer you some in the pass game department. He's not an elite level wide receiver. There's no elite skill set outside of the power game that he offers you. This is a chain mover, a thumper. But for everything it is, he's not the fastest running back, but as you can tell, man, there was a ton of explosives for Kaytron Allen. If you watch the last 4 years of college football at Penn State, Kaytron Allen was the most, versatile, dynamic back, and that's within the same backfield as Nicholas Singleton, who I think has a lot of ball carrier vision issues. Doesn't necessarily see the hole. Well, Kaytron Allen sees the hole, and when he hits it, it's north and south. It's one cut and go. It's going to be behind this zone blocking scheme. I mean, basically, we all talk about Sonic and Knuckles, and Montgomery for the Detroit Lions. It's not explosive, it's not dynamic, but he accumulated a ton of touchdowns, a ton of first downs, a ton of physical yards after contact. That is what Kaytron Allen is going to offer you. So can Bill Jacory-Krosky-Merritt really get into the lab, improve himself in the passing game? Adam Peters said it, going into this draft, he loves Jeremiah Love, blah, 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 things like that, but he got Bill in the 7th round. Now you're getting a running back in the 6th round with Kaytron Allen to kind of pair with that. Now you have your speed and explosiveness, and now you're adding that thumper to that room. This is everything that, I think Chris Rodriguez gave you with a little bit higher level skill set. I mean, this wasn't a very, very strong running back class. Kaytron Allen was one guy that I was just like, I mean, dude, wherever he goes, it's not going to be early, but the value of the production, and the production is there. Should have gone higher, in my opinion, especially for the running back class overall. I mean, everybody loved Jonah Coleman because you see the receiving threat and things like that. But, I mean, outside of Jonah Coleman, outside of Jadarian Price, outside of Jeremiah Love, Kaytron Allen is the running back that's grading up there with them, and you got this guy in the 6th round, and this is what happens year after year after year. The running back room, if they don't necessarily have those explosive markers, then they're basically a devalued player. And I mean, the production, the impact, the way this guy runs behind his pads, everything that you're getting from this position is going to be plus level. Is he going to break the 80-yard runs in the NFL? No, probably not. But the accumulation of 10-yard runs, 8-yard runs, the runs that he's getting plus level yardage when he's getting hit in the backfield, like yards beyond contact, beyond first contact, Kaytron Allen is very, very elite in that department, and it's going to set this team up for favorable, 2nd and 6s, 2nd and 5s, or get you into 2nd and 3s, with this type of guy coming out of the backfield early. If Bill can really, really, really excel beyond what he did last year as a receiver, as a 3rd down back, hitting the hole in more favorable situations, and now you're wearing on teams and you're wearing on defenses, and I think you have a good combination of skill set right in that room. You also added Jerome Ford. You have Rashad White. These are 2 guys that can excel in a very similar role. Jerome Ford more to Kaytron Allen. Rashad White minus the explosive ability, more in the lines of what you're going to get from Bill. So again, you have guys in this room now. You have a multitude of skill sets. Now you have depth in this room. So again, I like what Adam Peters has done over the course of the last 3 years as improving the skill set in the running back room. Now you're starting to stack draft classes, whether it's Trey Amos and Mikey Samerstill, bringing in Amik Robertson. Maybe there isn't, that cornerback room is not finished. looking at next year, looking at my guy, which is actually kind of the paper that I just showed you. This was the Mississippi State Arizona State game. This was a game that I was very, very much highlighting. You see all these tallies. This is how I do the games. Well, it was one of the matchups that I finally got to see. Jordan Tyson in. Jordan Tyson accumulated 5 tallies for me over the course of that game. Kelly Jones accumulated 2 star plays, 1 elite play, and 10 tallies for me, whether it was in coverage, tackling, run game, or just completely eliminating Jordan Tyson from a play. All these tallies and different markers that I give these players throughout the game. Kelly Jones is definitely going into the season for me as the number 2 cornerback in next year's class. We're talking about a 6'4" player with elite movement skills. I mean, elite size, height, weight, speed, length in the arm department. Plays very, very good at the catch point and things like that, and he is not grabby at the wide at the cornerback position. I mean, of course, there are some grabs on tape. It's something you're going to marker with any cornerback. It's something that I told you going into this class, whether it was Igbinosun or, certain guys, if you're a man-up corner, man, no matter who you are, no matter, like I said, Brandon Cisse, very similar. Not in the length department, but in the athletic makeup department. Cisse's given up 3 inches to Kelly Jones and his measurables and things like that. But again, at the catch point, certain times players that play man-heavy systems, they're going to get grabby. It's just there's nothing you can do about it. You're going to see the grabs on tape. Every cornerback gets beat at some point, and it's are they a naturally grabby player? Are they panicking at the catch point? And Kelly Jones is one of the cleanest cornerbacks as far as for me. We all know Leonard Moore is the premier player prospect. We've seen him do it as a true freshman. We saw him do it as a true sophomore. We're going to see it again this year. Leonard Moore is going to be the face of the class. He's 6'2", 205 pounds, so he's got all the elite measurables. I mean, we're talking about a guy that's going to have probably a Patrick Surtain level grade for me. Who was one of my highest graded cornerbacks, ever coming out of college. So again, man, I think Leonard Moore, Kelly Jones, they're going to be the face of it, and then there's a bunch of guys that are coming out behind them that I have really, really high markers on too going into this 2027 draft. As I've been going back and doing my thing, I do always scout cornerbacks last. I can always kind of marker them as I'm doing my wide receiver work, which I do early because for me, doing my quarterback work, the wide receivers always kind of pair into it. So it's always about doubling up, man. Like when you're scouting one position, you're always kind of doubling up and getting 2 positions at the same time based off of what you're looking for. Running backs and O-line are very similar in that regard. Looking at linebackers and defensive linemen, you can kind of go into that when you're doing offensive line or running backs. When you're going back and watching the game for the second and third time, you're highlighting running back, lanes and things like that from the offensive line, and then is the running back making yards after contact, or is there nothing there for them, and then they're creating beyond what the offensive line did for them. It's very, very similar with doing it with the defense. The defense is swarming. Okay, these guys are, linebackers, defensive tackles, defensive ends, they're all pursuing and swarming to the ball. They're closing up run fits and things like that. So again, it's very easy when you're I shouldn't say easy. It's not easy at all. It's why you watch these games 4 and 5 and 6 times, and then when you really break it down into all 22, where there is no commercials and things like that, and you can just kind of sim through the game very, very quickly. Like I said, live is the most that matters because you really, really get a better feel for the game flow, games situationally, the different, momentums and things like that teams are coming off of. That's why live is so much more so much more effective for being a scout. That's why I prioritize my live game fits and key matchups going into those. And I really, really like what I take away as a scout from looking at those. And again, man, so, the last 2 picks for the Commanders were a offensive center from Michigan State, Gublin. He was a team captain. It's not necessarily the most athletic guy. He's probably the least athletic player as far as RAS score that Adam Peters has selected in his time here, but he was a team captain. Does a very, very good job going forward. In the pulling department, I think there's a little bit more to be had. Not typically what I would necessarily have wanted for this team for what, of course I had guys like Sam Hecht and Coogan, but every time the Commanders were coming up on day 3, there was a center run right before us. So again, I'm glad that we didn't reach for it. We did get a developmental player at the position that's going to be good in the locker room. ultimately can probably step in a guard or center for this team if there was an injury. But the best case for this team is that, nobody goes down, and, he gets time to develop, and maybe he can improve that lateral agility and things like that, working here, just getting better with his feet and his technique, and, kind of moving down the line and things like that. Also last year, the player that we signed as our priority unrestricted free agent for out of North Carolina, NC State. This was a guy that worked at center. Everybody was reporting, once he got cleared to, resume practices and things like that last year, coming off of a pec tear in the offseason coming out of NC State, would have been a guy that I had a fourth round grade on. They said they worked him a lot at center. So again, I think that's going to be a guy competing for a backup center role, behind Nick Allegretti this year. So I mean, for all the things, we need to take a center. We need to take a center. I'm sure there were some guys that really, really looked fine, in practice and on the scout team and things like that as the season was going around. And there's got to be a reason that they're comfortable working with Nick Allegretti, and then maybe, like I said, the unrestricted free agent from last year, as a backup center, or, maybe Goblin beats him out. Maybe both of those guys are kind of like your backup guard center, players, and then, you have Trent Scott, your backup swing tackle, and things like that. It's all about diversity in the room for this team. All in all, love the Antonio Williams pick, love the Katron Allen pick, and I like the Joshua Josephs pick a lot. I think there's a lot of high development upside for this player. The get off is very, very good. The speed to power, and he can only improve in that department. Has good hand usage. Again, you just haven't seen him get the reps in the 4 years of college, but when you do see him and he wins, it's there's a multitude of ways he can win with a spin move. Doesn't do it consistently, but he can do it. So once you've seen it, can he? Like I said, it's more about this guy developing a game plan, a plan of attack, and things like that. So and it's a guy that you have under contract for the next 4 years on a rookie deal, 5th round contract. It's going to be cheap. So again, man, you're adding a cheap, high upside developmental piece, and a guy that probably should have gone 2 or 3 rounds before that, as far as what you were looking at from the measurable markers, the explosive markers, and the things like that, and all the things that I had in my notes. I thought he would have gone much higher, and I think that was a consistent narrative around this draft. And I've thought so for the last couple years, as far as our higher end players outside of maybe a Ben Sinnott. I didn't necessarily think he would be available to us when we picked, but I did think his consensusly great. Typically, tight ends, more H-back style tight ends, don't go in the second round. They usually go round 3, round 4. The developmental differences of how teams use these guys in the NFL. The H-back position is a very, very scheme. It's a very, very niche position. Certain teams don't even use it. David Blau, Ben Johnson, those guys, they're more in that department as far as using that type of player. We've seen guys that like the Cardinals tight end and things like that, who kind of played that H-back position in college and then developed into elite level tight end. It takes them a little bit more time usually. So hopefully we can start to see some of Ben Sinnott, come out and making more of an impact, especially with Chigakwanko and the athletic markers that he presents as far as the tight end position. All in all, I'm very, very happy with what we did with a limited number of picks. I am thankful we didn't move any picks for the 2027 class. Next year is a very, very much different class as far as the notes that I had coming into 2020, the 2025 season, the 2026 draft class. The notes that I have are very, very different compared to the notes that I have for these players. I mean, most of my highest graded players going into last year's class are the same players that I have going into this year's class. So last year I was very, very much curious about who was really, really going to take the step, or who were going to be the guys. And the funny thing was most of the guys that I had graded up top going into for this year's class that were actually going to be eligible, there were a lot of questions for me, and those questions still remained going throughout the season and things like that. And a lot of it is projection and scheme based, and scheme fits, and that's what I was saying was very, very dominating, as far as the narrative around this draft class. Next year, you're going to see a lot of scheme diverse players. You're going to see a lot of 5 stars that are, we're getting back to, now it's 4 and 5 years of eligibility and things like that. It's no longer the COVID year and holdovers and 6 and 7 year players in college football. We're going to start to get back to the normal transition and normal, lifespan of college football, players playing 4, 5 years tops and things like that. The the situation in college football has really, really been crazy since 2020. And like I said, this is going to be the first year where I think it starts to level out and you start to see it really being based off of 3 and 4 year players coming out. And, you'll have the fifth years and things like that, but it's not going to be the heavy, loaded draft classes of them, as far as like your 25 and 26-year-old players. You're going to start to see less and less of that coming into play now that we're getting 4 and 5 and 6 years away from the COVID situation and the narrative and the extra years of eligibility that they've allowed. So again, man, from the Blue Chip Podcast, man, I really, really appreciate it. It's been a busy weekend. I'm really, really going to get into I'll probably have a 2027 look ahead for my preseason grades. I can probably give a top 50, top 100 as far as names that I'm looking forward to in this next class. I brought quite a few of them up from the top tier end. As far as the cornerback, edge, wide receiver position, those are positions that I'm favoring. Just like last year, I was talking about linebackers, edge, wide receivers. This year, it's very much going to dominate into the cornerback, probably safeties and things like that. That's what I'm seeing from this class. Offensive line grades are going to be much, much higher, even though we don't necessarily have the need. I always say you pick trenches every year. I think the defensive tackle position for this team is going to start to look really, really different as far as what is this team going to do with Daron Payne going forward long term. Does Jerzon Newton finally hit his markers from what you drafted him at value wise? Does he finally give you that value on the field? Javon Kinlaw, how much more is he going to be involved into our future? Or was that a temporary fill in while these defensive tackle grades start to really, really escalate and get higher? I think next year's class is going to be loaded with interior defensive players that are very, very disruptive. We're going to get back more into that. This wasn't the best year for that. Next year, I have a ton of defensive tackles that are going to go high. So again, it's always every year, every draft class, the narrative around the draft class is all based off of the talent pool that's in the class. These next couple classes, man, have some really, really high-end players at a lot of positions that, there's going to be some transitioning from what Adam Peters inherited or, free agents that he has brought in to kind of supplement the roster. Or, are we going to see some of the draft picks, start to excel? We brought in a Tim Settle again, another, piece that you're looking at as a temporary fill-in going forward. You're going to look to retool your roster at the interior defensive line. We've put a lot of assets into the edge position and things like that. This over the course of this year, you're still going to look for more long-term pieces. Your next year's class is going to be riddled with them, at least on the premier higher end. I don't know how it's going to grade out through the draft. I'm nowhere near deep enough into my grades and my notes and my total recollection of everything that I needed to do for next year's class going into the preseason to give you how many guys do I really think can get into the top 3 frames as far as draft grades and things like that from the edge position. I haven't even gotten there yet. I'm just kind of taking notes on the quarterback. So, of course, I get some notes on the edges because they're constantly bringing pressure on these quarterbacks, transitioning them forward. But I do expect a much deeper, higher end offensive line class. I do expect a much deeper defensive front class. Definitely the cornerback position, definitely the wide receiver position. They're going to be loaded, absolutely loaded. And then I see much better running back play for next year's class too. So I just expect a much deeper draft in general. Haven't gotten to the tight ends or anything like that yet. We'll get into that. So like I said, I'll probably get a top 50, top 100 board for what I've already done for the work for the last 2 months as far as looking for the preseason and grading, what we're kind of looking forward to. Are these guys going to excel in our preseason board for the 2026 season? I have plenty of time to do that. Football is a ways away. Spring games are going on right now. That'll kind of help me with that too. It solidify what I'm seeing from these guys as far as the work they put in from the off season. But again, it's draft season. It's finally over. It's very exhausting. It's a ton of work getting culminated over the course of like February to this draft. So it's really like a year and 2 months, but really it's like 3 and 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, because I watch these players from high school and then the developmental, notes that I take from that time it's a culmination of a lot of things. So again, from the Blue Chip Podcast, man, draft season's over. Hopefully, if you aren't a Commanders fan, that your team did everything that you wanted. I saw a lot of really, really good selections from the Ravens, Browns, Jets, Raiders. I mean, just the accumulation of draft capital that them teams had and the way that they used them. The Giants did, like I said, I've talked about the NFC East and those teams doing really, really good. Carolina Panthers were a team that I was very, very impressed with coming out of the draft. I think they did a lot to, put things around Bryce Young and, kind of continue to build off of what they've done. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers were just very, very Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They play physical interior defensive football, man. Whether it's Vita Vea, they want to beat you up front on the edges. They really, really good linebacker play, well disciplined, well coached. You know what they do in the back end of that defense, especially up the middle. So again, man, they were very, very impressive in holding true as to what they did. The Steelers did very, very Steeler things, man. It was really, really cool moment seeing the Navy running back, who is a hometown kid in Pittsburgh, get drafted, man. It's one of the coolest moments I think I've ever seen in the draft. So again, from the Blue Chip Podcast, man, like I said, man, I'm really, really excited for this season to get kind of underway. This is the first step in getting there. Like I said, hopefully your team did good. Thank you guys for tuning in, checking us out. Any comments you guys have, anything you want me to maybe talk to about your team if you're not a Commanders fan. If you are a Commanders fan, I can kind of answer some questions about a lot of the players that we picked, some of the UDFAs that we're going to sign. I'll be doing a pod on that soon. There's not enough names out for me yet to really finalize our roster in that regard. And yeah, man. So we're getting closer to the 2026 football season, man. Hopefully your team did everything that they needed to do to improve. As a Commanders fan, with the limited amount of picks between our free agency and from our draft, just my initials are very, very positive. But ultimately, the coaches got to coach them up, man. They got to fit. They got to, really, really work their ass off into getting into this season, staying healthy, being prepared, and training properly, and having their bodies right going into the season, mentally and physically. It takes a lot of factors to really, really excel and be a good team in the season for football, and then to carry it multiple years, man. It's one of the hardest things to do. So ultimately, I hope we did enough. I like the top end picks that we made. I like some of the depth picks that we made, and some of the additions. I like that we they really, really fit systematically what I think we're going to see on this football field this year. So again, from the Blue Chip Podcast, man, have a blessed week. Hopefully, like I said, your team did great. And, like I said, thank you just for checking out the pod. Like, comment, subscribe, do anything you need to do. I will get back to you if you comment. I will always answer. I will put things on the pod from you if you ask me about it. And, I just thank you guys for tuning in. Have a blessed week. Pete.